Hey everyone. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sixpath Weeb, and you're tuned into my anime fanfic world here on YouTube. Today, we've got an exciting topic: Naruko encountered a spirit. What happens when Naruto's world meets the supernatural? Stick around as we dive into this thrilling adventure. Quick disclaimer, the content here is all for fun and discussion. I don't own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits go to their rightful creators and copyright holders. So, without further ado, let's get started. Naruko was well aware that she was disliked by a large portion of the Konoha population. She was even hated by many. Despite this, Naruko was never physically harmed. What she received were icy glares, whispers behind her back, and a general sense of being shunned. However, her safety was ensured by the Anbu guards the third Hokage had stationed to protect her. Still, the emotional toll was real. The old Hokage would have done anything to ease the pain she felt, but enforcing such a law would be nearly impossible. For now, the villagers held their grudges, but they refrained from acting on them out of fear that the Kyuubi, contained within Naruko, would cause destruction if provoked. Though the villagers weren't irrational, even the Hokage couldn't keep watch over every shinobi. And as history had shown, there was always someone who would try to challenge the Jinchuriki. Danzo, for example. Yet, Sarutobi Hiruzen continued to count his blessings, as he had not yet needed to use Anbu to stop those foolish enough to harm Naruko. That was, until that one fateful night. Hiragi Yuma was a survivor of the Third Shinobi War. He had been one of the first users of Fuin Jutsu from Iwa. After the war, he retired from his role as a frontline seal master. Unlike those who specialized in crafting complex seals for research, Yuma's talent lay in executing seals quickly on the battlefield, providing critical backup to his comrades. Yet, he was thoroughly humiliated when Konoha's Yellow Flash, Namikaze Minato, decimated his Iwa forces before he could even act. The only reason he survived the encounter was by hiding under a comrade's corpse and suppressing his chakra. He would never forget the gleaming, brilliant eyes that stared at him, eyes filled with overwhelming power. But Yuma didn't harbor any grudge against Namikaze Minato. Instead, he admired him as a fellow seal master. Yuma, although talented, knew he could never match Minato's genius in sealing. Minato had created seals that defied the limits of what Yuma had believed was possible. Yuma retired after realizing the gap between them was too vast to close, and that chasing this unattainable dream would be a futile pursuit. Years later, news of Minato's death during the Kyuubi's attack on Konoha reached Yuma. Rumors floated about Minato's final act, a self-sacrificial seal to contain the Kyuubi. Some speculated that Konoha had created another Jinchuriki, and Yuma's curiosity was piqued. If Minato had died while sealing the Kyuubi, it could only mean one thing: Konoha had performed a unique, life-costing seal. Konoha was tight-lipped about its Jinchuriki, and all Yuma knew was that the village had held the Kyuubi for some time, with a few Jinchuriki before the current one. The last seal Minato had created intrigued him. Yuma decided to visit Konoha to find out more. Sneaking into Konoha wasn't easy, especially with the Uzumaki clan's barrier protecting the village. After a significant amount of research, he found someone who traded a route into the village for information. In exchange, Yuma gave up his life's work to Konoha's dangerous missing nin, Orochimaru. Once inside, he easily blended in, dressed as a civilian. He found it surprisingly simple to gather information about the Jinchuriki. His breakthrough came when he overheard a conversation at a dengo shop, where a group of villagers referred to a young blonde child as a monster. That was his cue. Yuma quickly realized this child couldn't be left unguarded. Anbu shadowed the Jinchuriki, as was standard for non-adult hosts of Baijuo. Yuma observed for several days, realizing that Naruko often used her pranks to attract attention. Though the Anbu could track her most of the time, there were moments when she managed to slip away unnoticed. This was when Yuma saw his opportunity. On the 6th day of his stay, he set up a series of seals in the marketplace. He didn't have to wait long for Naruko to execute her latest prank, a harmless, yet overwhelmingly fragrant pink smoke that filled the area. The distraction was enough for Yuma to act. As Anbu rushed to handle the situation, he activated another seal that caused a minor explosion in a distant part of the marketplace. The noise and smoke made it even easier for Naruko to slip away unnoticed. Yuma followed her to a nearby alleyway, where he saw her attempt to climb onto a rooftop. Just as she was distracted by the sounds of the explosion, he struck quickly. With a swift blow, Naruko fell unconscious. Yuma applied a genjutsu, changing her appearance so she looked like a small brunette girl with fair skin. Then, he retreated, careful to avoid attracting attention. His plan was nearly perfect, until he caught sight of a pair of curious eyes. A woman with a child noticed him and stared. When Yuma saw the Uchiha clan symbol on their clothing, his heart skipped a beat. He quickly turned away and continued with his mission, determined to avoid drawing any attention from the Uchiha. The fate of Konoha's Jinchuriki was about to take an unexpected turn. The Seal Master turned around slowly, faking a kind, fatherly smile. "Ah, good afternoon, Uchiha-san," he greeted the Uchiha woman genially. "What a fine day, isn't it?" Uchiha Mikado raised an eyebrow. It had been a while since anyone greeted an Uchiha so politely like this man did. She had called out to him simply because she sensed something off about him, or was it the child? Now that she thought about it, it was probably just her being paranoid. "Good afternoon to you, too. The breeze is indeed very nice today. Is that why your daughter fell asleep?" she asked with a smile on her lips. The man nodded stiffly. "Yes, she also exhausted herself playing in the playground today," he added, mentally cursing himself for engaging in a conversation with an Uchiha. It was truly fortunate he hadn't used a henge at all on himself. If he had, she would be even more suspicious. "I see," she said softly. "Then I will be on my way," she muttered as she turned to walk away, but Sasuke stopped her with a frown. "Ka-san." Mikito tugged on Sasuke's hand, gently dragging him with her. "Not now, Sasuke. If there's anything you want to buy, it'll have to wait," she said as the father-daughter pair walked away from them. "But, Ka-san," Sasuke whined. "That man lied." "Sasuke," the Uchiha matriarch warned. "Don't accuse someone you just met, especially a civilian at that. They were in a bad enough position in the village as it was, and it would be bad if rumors of Sasuke accusing civilians as liars spread. Besides, why would he lie to me?" she asked logically. Sasuke frowned, then muttered, "Yes, Ka-san." Obediently, he followed his mother back to the Uchiha compound. Sasuke recalled the only playground in Konoha was not currently usable. When he and Itachi had walked around the park yesterday, there was a repair in progress sign near the playground. Itachi was shaking his head when he said someone named Guy accidentally ran into it or something along that line. So that man lied to his mother about his daughter exhausting herself playing, but Ka-san was right. The man had no reason to lie. Or did he? Ka-san wouldn't listen, so he'd have to tell his brother later. Naruko blinked her eyes open and looked at her surroundings. She was in a large room with lots of boxes and bottles, a sake warehouse? She crinkled her nose at the scent. She hated the smell of sake as it reminded her of the drunks who had said unpleasant things to her. Naruko startled when she set her eyes on a stranger smiling at her with a genuine smile. The man had long, brown hair and green eyes, and his build was similar to the Anbu she had seen before with a dog mask. "Hello, kid, are you alright?" Yuma asked. Now that he had a close look at the child, Yuma could see the similarity between her and Namikaze. Iwa would freak if they knew the Yondaime Hokage had managed to procreate and turn the girl into a Jinchuriki. "Who are you?" "I am Uzumaki Naruko." The Hokage had told her that it was common courtesy to give her own name before asking for someone else's. "Uzumaki?" He raised an eyebrow at the name. Yuma pointed at his chest and said, "Me? My name is Hiragi, so just call me Hiragi-san." His family name was pretty common, so telling the child was harmless. "Hiragi-san," Naruko tested the name. "I think I will call you Oji-chan instead." Yuma sighed. He deserved it since he was the same age as the Yondaime. "Fine." Naruko eyed Yuma curiously. Why am I here?" she asked. He grinned at that and said, "Oh, you were knocked out by a bad person. I saved you and brought you here." If his observation was correct, this child had never been attacked before and was incredibly lonely. If someone saved her, they could easily earn her trust. "You're safe here, Naruko-chan." And for added bonus, he ruffled the child's soft, spiky hair. This was the moment of truth. If a Shun Jinchuriki was touched, they would either lash out or welcome the affection as a sign of trust. As expected, the child looked at him admiringly. "Thank you, Oji-chan." Yuma smirked inwardly. That had been easier than he'd thought it would be. "You're welcome, Naruko-chan." Then he added after a beat, "But it seems the enemy ninja did something to you," he lied smoothly. "Eh? I can fix it for you though," Yuma assured the child. "Don't worry and just leave everything to me." Naruko paled at the thought of an enemy ninja having done something horrible to her. "Now." Yuma rummaged through his backpack and pulled out a storage scroll. He unsealed a wooden board the size of an adult with a seal array carved into it. Naruko watched the unsealing in awe. "That's so cool, Hiragi Oji-chan." "What is that?" Ninjutsu? Hiragi smirked. Not quite his father's child, huh? This is Fuuinjutsu. It's one of the most complex shinobi arts. See this array here? He tapped the board on the ground. You use hand seals to mold chakra for ninjutsu, while in Fuuinjutsu we use these to tell chakra what to do. Is it hard? Naruko's eyes were shining with glee. Depends on you. He didn't see anything wrong with indulging the child. He needed Naruko's full cooperation anyway. You have to be good at arithmetic, chakra theory, and calligraphy basically. Naruko crinkled her nose. I don't like any of that. Can that even be used like cool ninjutsu? Hiragi snorted. The Yondaime Hokage was a magnificent seal master. The next thing Hiragi knew, Naruko had latched her small body onto his arm like a koala. Teach me. She gave the seal master her puppy eyes. Please. Hiragi faltered. He had discovered another scary way to use Namikaze's azure eyes. I will fix you first, then we can talk about this again, okay, kid? Okay, Naruko agreed as she hopped off of Hiragi, bouncing on her feet. The seal master's sweat dropped at the sight of the hyper kid and silently thanked God that he was no longer an Iwa shinobi. Namikaze surely knew how to pick a wife. The rumor of his lover being the habanero was true, it seemed. The two powerful shinobi of Konoha had procreated. This child would be one hell of a shinobi. Then again, it was none of his business. He only wanted the data of Namikaze's last work, and then he was going to get out of Konoha faster than you could say ninja. Now lay down here, Naruko-chan, and take off your shirt. Naruko obeyed the instruction but shuddered when her skin touched the cold wood. Now what, Hiragi Oji-chan? She asked. Hiragi smiled. Just relax, you're going to fall asleep and when I finish, you will be as good as new. Okay. Naruko cheered. Hiragi formed seals for a sleep-inducing genjutsu, and Naruko quickly fell asleep. Finally, he sighed in relief. Pretending to be a kind uncle is exhausting. He grumbled under his breath, now. Let me see the last work of Namikaze Minato. He activated the seal array on the board, causing a seal to appear on Naruko's stomach. He gaped at the sight. Unbelievable. No wonder he died to make this. The seal was different than any other seal he'd seen before. There was not just one seal, there were 3 layers of seals. At first glance, it would look like only one seal, but a top-notch seal master would know there were 2 other seals. The first seal was the main seal that tied the Jinchuriki and her Baijuu together. The second and third, however, would be triggered in certain circumstances. Hiragi would bet they were failsafe seals and, considering the main seal and the Baijuu it held, it made Hiragi wonder what kind of seals those were. No one ever made a failsafe seal for a Jinchuriki. Then again, villages that had Jinchuriki didn't have Namikaze Minato. Hiragi couldn't suppress his growing curiosity and envy of the last work of the Yondaime. He badly wanted to unravel the seal, but that would have required him to be on the same level as Namikaze Minato or risk his life. He cackled at the thought. If I died here, it would be justified. I was supposed to die when he slaughtered my team anyway. It would be an honor to die for my research. He wondered if this was his sanity wavering again, one of the many reasons for his retirement. Then again, why would he care for the consequences? The worst thing that could happen would be unleashing the Kyuubi in Konoha, and that would only be giving Konoha what it deserved. Naruko would never have been so vulnerable and easily swayed if they hadn't shunned her. It was probably charity to the girl to let her have her own revenge. With that in mind, Hiragi continued his work, but first sealed everything he cherished inside a special storage scroll. It was more durable than the average storage scroll in that it could withstand explosive tags and other harmful elements. Nothing weaker than a Baijuu Dama could destroy it, he supposed, as he began to work. Kyuubi perked up, growling when he saw the Yondaime walk up to his cage. What do you want, Yondaime? Someone is trying to tamper with the seal, the blonde Hokage muttered. I don't know why, but it activated the failsafe temporarily. Kushina then appeared beside him. It activated mine too. She growled. Who's the fool? If I get my hands on the guy, I'll stop him. Kyuubi rolled his eyes. You're dead, Kushina, he pointed out with a deadpan tone. The second Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi glared at her ex-prisoner. Thank you for reminding me, she growled, but what happened to my daughter? Minato paled when he saw Kyuubi's chakra leak from his cage. Kyuubi. You. The Baijuu bared his fangs. Not my doing, Yondaime. In case your memory is as bad as your mate's, your seal is designed so the brat can borrow my chakra. The fox pointed out. I did not will even a small fraction of it to leak into her system, so if it kills the brat and me too, you have no one to blame but yourself. Minato grit his teeth. You really? His eyes widened. Kushina. Your chakra. Kushina looked at herself. My chakra, it seeped into Naruko's. Mine too. What's happening? Is the failsafe seal broken? He quickly went to check the seal on the Kyuubi's cell. This one is safe, at least. For now. Kushina breathed a sigh of relief. That's good, I checked the failsafe chakra too and it doesn't seem like it's going to break but. But? Minato asked, dreading her next words. But what? Some of our chakra and memories have seeped through because of this. I don't know how it will affect our daughter. Kushina clasped her fingers together. Naruko. Kyuubi snorted, it's been boring here save for her occasional prank anyway. As long as it's not life-threatening, who cares? We care. The fox laughed at that, but frowned when he saw the Yondaime and his wife disappear from the sewer. It seemed the seal had stabilized again. He wondered what had happened to them just now, though he didn't truly care. He just didn't want the couple to be able to annoy him all the time. Hiragi left the warehouse in a daze, filled with worry about what had nearly happened. At first, he thought he could act recklessly, even if he were caught, when he examined the seal, but the immense chakra Naruko emitted almost overwhelmed him. The chakra's energy felt intense and filled with so much emotion that it made him feel unsettled. No matter how experienced you were as a shinobi, that kind of power could make even the strongest waver. It was overwhelming, full of emotion, and made you feel like you had no control over your senses. It was a mistake. A huge mistake. Hiragi's stomach churned, and he staggered like he couldn't quite keep his balance. He leaned against a tree, his body shaking from the force of the experience. Just then, a group of Anbu appeared before him, instructing him to come with them. As usual, they were following protocol, but Hiragi had no intention of complying. He knew that going with them meant interrogation, and with his mind in such a disoriented state, the only solution he could think of was what any skilled seal master would do. Though it involved the daughter of the brilliant shinobi he'd admired from afar, he felt assured that his work would not be in vain. Back in the warehouse, Naruko woke up with a soft yawn, scanning her surroundings. The kind elderly man she had known was no longer there. She felt a pang of loneliness, ready to cry from the familiar feeling of being abandoned. But her gaze landed on something else, a beautifully crafted scroll lying beside her. Curiously, she reached for it, noticing a note attached to it. Naruko-chan, I must leave for an important mission and may not return. As I promised, here is a scroll to teach you everything I know about Fuinjutsu. Use this to follow in your father's footsteps and become a great seal master. I am sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person. Take care. Naruko smiled brightly. Hiragi Jiken had kept his promise. As she sat up, her hand instinctively pressed against the inner side of her leg. It was a precaution, something she had learned from her mentor, a way to protect herself if she was ever in danger. She winced as she applied the right amount of pressure, feeling a sharp sting. Hiragi's expression remained calm, even as he struggled with the pain, while the Anbu watched, surprised by his resilience. I hope you'll remember this, Naruko, Hiragi whispered, before his eyes grew distant, his strength fading away. Naruko ran back to her home with the scroll Hiragi Jiken had given her safely tucked in her backpack. She was grinning from ear to ear at the prospect of learning cool Fuinjutsu and becoming a seal master, just like the Yondaime and Hiragi Jiken. However, her excitement faltered when she noticed an Anbu squad stationed in front of her home. She stopped, then jogged over to them. Hello, good evening, what are you doing here? The Anbu member with a bird-shaped mask crossed his arms. Where were you, Naruko-chan? Tori asked, his voice tinged with concern. They had captured the man suspected of kidnapping Naruko, but further investigation revealed he had acted alone. The squad had searched the entire village and were instructed to wait for Naruko at her home while another team continued the search. Naruko raised an eyebrow. Hey, shouldn't you know where I am? Like, all the time? She pointed out, innocently unaware that she had unintentionally teased the Anbu squad for losing track of her again. Naruko-chan, Tori warned, his tone soft but serious. He flushed under his mask. We're going to see Hokage-sama. After a pause, he added, and you're grounded. 3 days without pranking and no ramen. Naruko flinched at the mention of being grounded. Sorry, Tori. I'll just put my backpack in my room first, okay? A bare-masked Anbu stretched out his hand to Naruko, and she quietly handed over the backpack. Kuma sighed as he jumped onto Naruko's balcony and placed the backpack there, knowing no one would steal it. Naruko opened her mouth to protest leaving her backpack behind, but before she could say anything, Tori lifted her onto his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. "You're in trouble, Naruko-chan," Tori stated sternly, taking a large leap toward the Hokage tower. "But Tori 55ie, Naruko whined. Tori was the only Anbu member who spoke to her regularly. It wasn't that the others were forbidden from talking, but Tori was the squad's spokesperson. Over the years, Naruko had grown good at reading their body language. If they crossed their arms or tapped their limbs, it usually meant she was in trouble. If their shoulders twitched slightly, it meant she had done something amusing. No buts. Naruko had read the rest of the note Hiragi had left, including the part where he asked her to keep the scroll a secret. It was meant to be for Naruko alone, not Konoha. If anyone found out about it, they would take it away from her. She was warned about the potential consequences, but she struggled with the idea of either telling Hokage Jiken or lying to him. The Hokage had always treated her kindly, even assigning an Anbu squad to protect her. Naruko owed him a lot, and the least she could do was be honest. But Sandaime Jiken had never shared anything about her parents. Whenever Naruko asked about them, he quickly changed the subject. All she knew was that they had died as heroes, though how they had become heroes was never explained. And no one had ever explained why she was shunned by so many. "I fell asleep in the forest." Technically, it was true. She had been sleeping, though it was in a sake warehouse on the outskirts of Konoha. "The weather was nice, and when I woke up, it was late," she mumbled. Since the Hokage didn't trust her with certain information, Naruko thought it was only fair she kept a few things to herself, too. The Sandaime, of course, knew Naruko was lying, but what good would forcing the truth out of her do? Naruko had inherited a stubborn streak from her parents. "I see. You may go." That night would change everything. On the way home, Naruko was once again carried by Tori. Her eyes were glazed over, a multitude of thoughts running through her mind. "The main character is just like you, sensei. Naruko. It's a beautiful name. Realize what's most important to your sister. I hope our daughters will be good friends, neither shinobi nor Jinchuriki." "Naruko?" Tori called. He chuckled when he saw she had fallen asleep on his back. "Fell asleep, I see." Kuma snorted. "She really wore us out today." Deep within Naruko, Kyubi felt a strange twinge. It seemed the Yondaime and his wife had feared what might happen. The memories and chakra from the seal had begun to leak into Naruko's system. But Kyubi didn't really mind. He had had 2 female Jinchuriki before, so a little girl wasn't much of an issue in his eyes. He had thought about trying to manipulate Naruko, but his pride wouldn't let him act like Shukaku. That Tanuki had a terrible reputation, always bragging about his strength. Kyubi didn't want to fall to such a low level. Speaking of pride, he wondered how his fellow Baijuu were faring with their Jinchuriki. When Kushina was alive, he had heard of Matatabi and Gyuki. It seemed Gyuki had been a good friend to his Jinchuriki. The second strongest Baijuu had made peace with his shinobi Jinchuriki. "Shut up," Kyubi roared to no one in particular. "Kushina, stop playing with your chain, or I will." He paused, unsure of what he could possibly do to threaten her. She existed only through chakra and memories, so he quickly abandoned the thought. The rattling noise annoyed him endlessly, but it wasn't worth worrying about. The next morning. "I can't sleep, it's so noisy. What a dream. Full of rattling chains." Naruko muttered, still half asleep, unaware that Kyubi shared the same discomfort. "I didn't even check on the scroll Hiragi Jiken left me." She blinked at the thought and went to the window. "Tori, can you tell Hokage Jiken I won't go to the academy today?" Tori almost fell off the tree he was perched on. He sighed, knowing this was just a regular occurrence when it came to Naruko. The young girl could always sense them, even if she couldn't see them. Sometimes, Tori wondered if she might be a sensor type, but according to the Hokage, the Uzumaki bloodline was known for sharp intuition. The Anbu sighed. "Naruko-chan," he started, but he stopped when he saw the tired expression on her face. "What's wrong? Didn't get enough sleep?" "I can't sleep," she replied, sounding exhausted. "Nightmare?" Tori asked gently. Naruko shook her head. It was a noisy dream. The sound of a rattling chain in a sewer. "I'll send a message to Hokage-sama," Tori said, nodding. "Go back to sleep, Naruko-chan." "My head hurts, Tori." The Anbu frowned. "We'll go see a doctor then." Naruko was too tired to protest. "Okay." Sanada Anzu, the only medic Sandaime trusted to handle Naruko with care, was the head doctor of the Konoha hospital. Anzu had been a dear friend to Kushina. She was well known for her medical expertise, even though she wasn't quite at Tsunade's level. In her younger years, Anzu had been poisoned during a mission and had lived with the lingering effects, but her skills were still top tier, and she was committed to serving Konoha. Anzu eyed Naruko carefully as she lay on the bed. "Naruko-chan, trouble sleeping?" she asked gently, then glanced at Tori. Tori nodded. She said, "It was a noisy dream. The sound of a rattling chain in a sewer." He quoted. Anzu raised an eyebrow. "Chain? That's odd. Reminds me of Kushina." She hesitated, then said, "I don't want to give her sleeping medicine, though. It didn't work for Kushina," she sighed. "For now, we just observe and make sure she's okay. There's nothing else we can do." Little did she know how right she was. Naruko woke to the sound of distant, frustrated cries and the sensation of wet feet. She couldn't remember how she ended up there. The last thing she recalled was napping on Tori's back while heading to the hospital. But why did the hospital feel so unfamiliar, almost like a sewer? It didn't seem very clean, did it? She muttered, almost losing her balance when the cries grew louder, echoing through the murky space. "If you know it's not clean, don't let your mind turn into a mess, child." "My mind?" Naruko repeated, her voice tinged with confusion as she hurried towards the source of the voice. "Who's there?" It didn't take long before she spotted a giant cage and a pair of red eyes glowing faintly from the shadows inside. Kyubi leaned closer to the bars, his fangs bared. "I see that my jailer has decided to grace me with her presence." She could tell the fox wasn't in the best of moods but decided not to provoke it further. "Jailer?" Naruko echoed. "Me?" "Yes, you." Kyubi growled. Then, with a grumble under his breath, added, "To my great misfortune." He wasn't in the mood for small talk, especially not after the disturbances he'd endured earlier. Naruko, unfazed, observed the giant shadow in front of her with innocent curiosity. "You're really big." "Very observant," Kyubi replied sarcastically. Naruko grinned widely. "Thanks." She rubbed the back of her head sheepishly, a gesture that made Kyubi pause. Her mannerisms reminded him strangely of Kushina when she was embarrassed. "You're too young to understand sarcasm," Kyubi muttered, rolling his eyes. "I doubt you even know what sarcasm is." "Oh. Could you teach me then?" Naruko asked, her voice brimming with innocence. To her, this fox seemed friendly enough, and having someone to talk to was a rare comfort. The people of Konoha often ignored her, and while the Anbu were kind, their interactions with her were mostly professional. "What's sarcasm? Is it something fun?" Kyubi let out a heavy sigh, realizing that he couldn't exactly expect a young child to understand the complexities of his existence. "Ugh. A child. Fine, whatever. Go away. I need some rest." "Oh. You're a girl? I thought your voice sounded a bit deep." "Sorry," Naruko said cheerfully, without a hint of malice. Kyubi's left eye twitched, clearly agitated. "I am no woman, child. Now, go away and don't come back." The silence was heavy, and then Naruko hiccuped, her sobs breaking through the stillness. Kyubi's irritation remained, but he found himself growing more uncomfortable as Naruko's crying grew louder. "Why are you crying, child?" Naruko hiccuped between sobs. "You told me to go away." "Hic. Just like the others." "Hic. They never want me around." Her tears flowed freely. "I don't want to be alone." Kyubi felt a strange twinge in his chest. He had no intention of comforting the child. He was, after all, a powerful, immortal being, far beyond such matters. But there was something about the child's vulnerability that piqued his attention. "I wish I could leave," Kyubi muttered, more to himself than to her. He had little desire to console her. And yet, there was a strange pull within him to at least offer her some explanation. "You can't leave? Why?" Naruko asked, her curiosity piqued despite the tears still staining her cheeks. The sight of her innocent eyes staring at him caused Kyubi's resolve to waver. He had no intention of letting a child like her get close to him, but there was something about her persistence that was hard to ignore. "I was sealed into you, so whether I like it or not, I'm stuck here with you for the rest of your life," Kyubi grumbled, his tone betraying his discomfort. "No escaping now." Naruko blinked in disbelief. "You'll be with me forever?" she repeated, her voice full of wonder. "To my great displeasure, yes," Kyubi admitted reluctantly. "I'm bound to you, and unless you mess things up, I'm not going anywhere." Naruko's wide, blue eyes sparkled. The concept of not being alone anymore made her heart swell with unexpected happiness. "So, you'll be here for me?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "Will you be my friend?" Kyubi stared at her, disbelief flashing across his face. "Friend?" He repeated, his voice dripping with incredulity. Do you even know who I am? No. Naruko replied cheerfully, completely unperturbed. How foolish can you be? Kyubi muttered, though his frustration was tinged with a strange curiosity. This child, despite everything, was the first to approach him without fear or hatred. You want to be friends with me? He couldn't believe it. I don't know, Naruko admitted, her eyes bright with determination. But you're the first person who's ever talked to me like this, not like I'm some monster. I just don't want to be alone anymore. Kyubi sighed, running his claws through his fur. He didn't have an answer to her naive request. Do you know what happened 6 years ago, on October 10th? Naruko tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. The fourth Hokage defeated the Kyubi and saved the village, right? Kyubi's frustration deepened, and he revealed his true form to the child. Naruko froze in awe at the size and power of the fox before her. And yet, here I am, sealed inside you, he said bitterly. That's the story they've fed you, isn't it? Naruko stared at him, taking in his words. She wasn't afraid, but confused. You're the Kyubi? Sealed inside me? That's why the grown-ups hate me? Kyubi gave a growl, clearly frustrated with the situation, but surprisingly, there was a hint of understanding in his voice. They think you're my reincarnation. Foolish humans. They fear a child like you without reason. Naruko's mind processed this revelation, and for the first time, she felt as though she understood why the villagers treated her so poorly. The puzzle pieces clicked together. So, it's not my fault? She asked, her voice trembling. I didn't ask for this. Did I? No, Kyubi answered, a hint of surprise in his tone. It's not your fault. Humans fear what they don't understand, and they fear me, so they lash out at you. Tears continued to flow down Naruko's cheeks, but they were now mixed with a strange feeling of relief. At least now I know. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything wrong. Her voice wavered as she looked at Kyubi with a sincere, hopeful expression. Can you tell me why you hate Konoha so much? Kyubi stared at her, shocked. No one had ever asked him such a question, not in all the years of his imprisonment. Humans are complicated. They can love, but they can also hate. Sometimes for no reason at all. Naruko, still processing everything, nodded. So, we don't have to hate each other, right? She asked, her voice full of quiet hope. Maybe we can try to understand each other? Kyubi was silent for a moment, an unreadable expression crossing his face. Could it be? Could this child, this innocent girl, actually be the one to break through the walls he had built around his heart? Perhaps. He sighed deeply. Maybe, child. Maybe. And in that moment, a small bond began to form between them, one neither of them could fully understand, but one that would shape both their futures in ways they never anticipated. Kurama clenched his teeth, recalling the memory of the human who once viewed him as a child, the only person whose departure had ever caused him sorrow. This child reminded him of their parent in many ways, and perhaps, just perhaps, this child was different from the others. Your village imprisoned me for years, chaining me to their will. He began. The Shodai Hokage captured and sealed me, hoping to keep me under control. Passing me from generation to generation. Then 6 years ago, I was freed from that seal. That's why you attacked Konoha when I was born? Naruko asked, her eyes wide with sorrow. So many lives were lost that day. Kurama scoffed. Had I a choice, I would have left and never returned instead of risking my freedom just to cause chaos. The Baijuu growled, his voice thunderous, sending Naruko tumbling into the water. Revenge is one thing, freedom is another. But someone controlled me, forcing me to attack your village. And guess what? I am sealed within you. So, the attack wasn't your fault? Naruko asked quietly. Absolutely not. Kurama growled. Look where it got me. His gaze turned stern as he looked at his Jinchuriki, noticing the child's shaking shoulders. You. Hey. Ha 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 ha, Naruko laughed softly, as if lost in her own thoughts. Why are you laughing? Kurama asked, clearly annoyed. Naruko grinned. No, it's just. We're both stuck with each other unwillingly, and neither of us is to blame. Ha ha ha. It's kind of funny, don't you think? Kurama stared, confused by the child's sudden change of mood. But soon, he noticed the tears welling up in Naruko's eyes. Are you laughing or crying, child? He asked, his voice softening. Naruko wiped her face. It's just. It never ends, she murmured, her voice filled with sadness. I should hate the villagers because they made my life so hard, but since they hate me because of you, I should hate you instead. But it's not really your fault. And now I don't know what to feel. Naruko shook her head. It just keeps going in circles. Should I be angry at the Yondaime for sealing you and me? No. He did what he had to in order to protect Konoha. But then should I hate Konoha? It just keeps going back and forth. And it hurts. Kurama studied Naruko carefully. There was no sign of deception in her words. Her sincerity reminded him of her mother, Kushina, and Mito before her. I see. So what are you going to do, Naruko? Naruko looked at him, lost in thought. I don't know, she admitted. Will you be my friend? Kurama stared at her for a moment, clearly perplexed. Why would you want to be friends with a Baijuu? Someone who has caused so much pain for your village? Naruko smiled brightly. Well, Tori once said, birds of the same wings gather together. I think you mean birds of a feather flock together, Kurama corrected, rolling his eyes. Naruko blinked, surprised. Oh yeah, that's right. And, since we're stuck together, I thought we might as well try. Kurama sighed. No. Why not? Just because. Naruko pouted, but her smile soon returned. I guess this is what they call the courting process. She had once seen a jounin trying to befriend someone, and when the jounin failed, another had advised him to slow down and be more patient. Kurama raised an eyebrow. Courting is about getting a mate, Naruko. My name is Uzumaki Naruko. It's nice to meet you, she said, cheerfully ignoring his correction. What's your name? Kurama groaned. You know who I am. Naruko tilted her head in confusion. Is Kurama your real name? Kurama groaned again. He was reluctant to admit it, as it would dishonor the one who had given him that name. It's what I am, not my real name. Ninetales is not who I am. But if that's what you are, I don't want to call you Kurama anymore, Naruko exclaimed with a frown. That's like the villagers calling me that girl or monster. They don't care who I am. Kurama let out a long sigh, clearly agitated. This was getting out of hand. Fine. My name is Kurama, but don't get too attached to it, he grumbled. It's not something I'm going to keep telling you about. Naruko beamed at hearing his name. Kurama. That's a nice name. You know, my name means maelstrom. Kurama snorted. Actually, your name was inspired by something that happened while eating ramen, he muttered under his breath, recalling Kushina and Minato's conversation with the Toad Sage. Did you say something? Naruko asked, her ears perking up. No. Oh, okay. So what does your name mean? She asked, grinning from ear to ear. Kurama growled. Enough already. You should feel honored that I even told you my name. But I'm not going to be your friend, that's for sure. Naruko looked like she was about to protest but instead held her tongue. She shook her head. I'm sorry for being annoying, Kurama. I just want people to notice me sometimes. Her voice softened, and for a moment, Kurama's heart wavered at the sincerity in her tone. But Naruko wasn't giving up. I won't give up, though. I want to be your friend because then we can both stop feeling all this hurt. Together. Kurama said nothing at first, but his gaze softened. After a pause, he sighed. Maybe. Just maybe, you can try. Naruko's eyes widened in surprise. That wasn't a definite yes, but it wasn't a rejection either. She had a glimmer of hope now, something she had never gotten from the villagers. Thank you, Kurama, she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. By the way, do you know how I get out of here? Kurama's left eye twitched. I'm going to regret this, aren't I? He muttered, but then sighed. For our survival's sake, stop trusting so easily. Naruko nodded thoughtfully, her expression one of reluctant understanding. I won't blame him for that either. Kurama snorted again. Whatever. Just know that your life is not your own. And maybe, one day, you can be the one we've been waiting for. All this time. Hey. What do you mean by that? Naruko asked, her voice trailing off as everything around her turned to white. Dash. Naruko woke up to see the Sandaime Hokage looking down at her with a worried expression. Hokage Jiken? The Hokage smiled and gently ran his fingers through her hair. How are you feeling, Naruko? Naruko stiffened for a moment but then smiled brightly. I'm fine, Gigi. She replied with a grin. I feel as good as new after a nice nap. The Hokage didn't press her further, though he suspected something was bothering her. I'm glad to hear that. It's almost dinner time, and Sanada-sensei said you deserve a good meal instead of hospital food. Ichiraku ramen. Naruko cheered excitedly. That night, yet another secret was born. Deep in her heart, Naruko wondered if there would ever be an end to the secrets building up or if she would ever be able to share them with the Hokage. But, if the Hokage in the village could keep secrets from her, maybe it was okay for her to do the same. Fuuinjutsu was a rare and complex art in the shinobi world, one that few practitioners fully embraced due to the immense research and skill required to master it. Despite its reputation for being safer in appearance, requiring only a brush, ink, and paper, Fuuinjutsu was, in fact, one of the most intricate and dangerous disciplines to study. Many shinobi perish not on the battlefield, but in their own study halls, victims of accidents caused by the slightest mistake in their seals. Even a small misstep in placing ink could trigger catastrophic effects. This is why the Uzumaki clan, with their exceptional intellect and resilience, became one of the few to specialize in this art, mastering it over generations. Fuuinjutsu offered almost limitless possibilities, enabling the containment of powerful beings and objects. Unlike the three primary shinobi arts, ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu, Fuuinjutsu was not a skill that could be learned by simply performing hand seals and training rigorously. Instead, mastery required a deep understanding of each seal's individual components and their interrelationships. A true master of Fuuinjutsu did not simply imitate what had been done before, they understood the art on a fundamental level, blending skill, theory, and precision. To begin learning Fuuinjutsu, one had to first master three key areas: mathematics, chakra theory, and calligraphy. Calligraphy, in this case, wasn't about elegance or grace, it was about accuracy and speed. A single stroke of the brush could mean the difference between success and failure. Chakra, the energy that fueled every seal, had to be understood in depth, how it moved, shaped, and reacted when channeled through different seals. Lastly, mathematics was necessary to understand the abstract structures of the seals, enabling the practitioner to predict and analyze the effects of their work with precision. Naruko wandered into the academy library, now a place of wonder for her as she thirsted for knowledge. She carefully selected a few books on subjects of interest, along with some extras, and began to read them one by one. Although the books were meant for younger students, and their content was basic, there was still much to learn. Naruko, aware that she could not possibly absorb everything at once, took diligent notes to study later, knowing full well that the librarian wasn't particularly fond of her presence. She could feel the librarian's gaze, one full of barely concealed frustration. Naruko couldn't help but wonder when the librarian might finally snap and ask her to leave, though she figured it wouldn't happen soon. After all, she wasn't doing anything wrong. Resolute, she focused on her work, determined to take notes from at least 2 books on each subject before leaving. Once she reached her target for the day, she shifted her attention to a book about ninja ranks. As she flipped through the pages, Naruko frowned when she reached the section on Chonin. There were 2 main ways to be promoted to Chonin: by passing the Chonin exam or through an in-field promotion. Both paths required leadership skills and an understanding of tactics. Naruko glanced at the Chonin librarian, still glaring at her, and couldn't help but roll her eyes. How could someone like that be promoted to such an important position when they couldn't even control their temper? But then again, she thought to herself, it wasn't her place to judge. Naruko finished up her notes and began gathering the books to return them neatly to their places. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the Chonin stand up, seemingly torn between reprimanding her and letting her go. No doubt, the librarian was concerned that she was planning some sort of prank or might damage the books. Naruko, however, didn't give the matter a second thought. She grabbed her notes and left the library quickly, allowing the librarian to search for any prank she might have been accused of. Idiots, Naruko thought with a sigh as she left. If Chonin were truly as skilled as the book suggested, they shouldn't be so easily distracted by the actions of a 6-year-old. For 2 months, the Choninins in charge of the academy library had been constantly on edge, not because of Naruko's pranks, but simply due to her presence, Naruko thought to herself with a touch of sarcasm as she continued her routine of visiting the library after class. 2 months ago, Naruko wouldn't have even understood what sarcasm was, but thanks to a dictionary, she was able to grasp it. She had asked Tori to help her buy one, as it was essential for understanding some of the more complex words in the Fuuinjutsu manuals. Naruko would have bought the dictionary herself, but she wasn't keen on dealing with the cold reception from some of the shopkeepers, especially after a previous encounter where one of them had insulted her, which led to a prank in retaliation. She had also visited Kurama frequently, but not by intention at first. It just so happened that when she slept, she would end up in the same strange, eerie sewer with the Baijuu. Naruko had tried many different methods to make contact with Kurama on her own, much to his annoyance, but none of them had been successful. After a month of trying, Naruko finally discovered that she could communicate with Kurama through meditation. It had been difficult at first, but with practice, it became easier, and now she could even stay conscious while speaking directly with Kurama in her mind, although the Baiju'u often ignored her. Naruko guessed that was because Kurama preferred face-to-face interactions. Despite Kurama's gruff and somewhat distant nature, Naruko was grateful that the fox allowed her to be in his presence. While Kurama wasn't exactly warm or welcoming, he was at least willing to engage in conversation with her, which was more than most people in Konoha would bother to do. To Naruko's delight, Kurama was a wealth of knowledge, and she couldn't help but think that the Baiju'u might know even more than the Sandaime Hokage. After all, Kurama was an ancient being, created by the sage of the Six Paths himself. Kurama had also told her about the Uzumaki clan, which thrilled Naruko as she learned that her clan specialized in Fuuinjutsu. However, it saddened her that the Uzumaki village, Uzu, was no longer around. When Naruko asked how Kurama knew about the Uzumaki clan, Kurama had scoffed and replied, "The sage of Six Paths' wife was an Uzumaki." Originally, the Uzumaki clan had descended from the Onmyoji line and were the first practitioners of Fuuinjutsu after the rise of the shinobi era. This was why the Uzumaki were considered distant relatives of the Senju and Uchiha clans, though the Uchihas never acknowledged it. With all the wisdom Kurama possessed, Naruko couldn't help but wonder why her predecessors had avoided conversing with the Baiju'u. They missed out on a lot, didn't they? Naruko said cheerfully when Kurama revealed that none of her predecessors had ever taken the time to listen to him, much less engage in a conversation. Naruko was overjoyed when Kurama agreed to tell her the story of the Sage of Six Paths. It seemed that, after years of being ignored by previous Jinchuriki, Kurama appreciated a good listener like Naruko. In fact, he was a much better teacher of history than any of the Chunin at the academy. Kurama would have raised an eyebrow if he had one. "Our conversations were never civil," he muttered, referring to his interactions with Mito and Kushina. "They never wanted to speak to me, and all I did was taunt them out of frustration. I didn't exactly have the best relationship with them." Naruko's expression softened at that. "I guess that means I'm special, huh?" she said, grinning widely. Kurama rolled his eyes. "Yes, you're certainly unique. And the most persistent," he added, his voice laced with sarcasm. Naruko chuckled. "Hey, we're working on that, okay?" "I suppose," Kurama grumbled. "Now, where was I last night?" "You met Kinkaku and Ginkaku and they challenged you," Naruko reminded him. Kurama sighed. "Ah yes, those two troublesome individuals." From her time with Kurama, Naruko had come to realize that the Baiju'u was far from the mindless, evil creature depicted in Konoha's history books. While he wasn't exactly a force of pure good, Kurama was intelligent and had a dry, sarcastic sense of humor. He wasn't the nicest of beings, but he was fair, and he respected those who treated him with respect. Kurama had shared many stories about the past, including his deep disdain for Madara, and the complicated history surrounding his role in the conflicts of the past. Naruko could understand why Kurama felt so strongly, considering how Madara had treated him. The fox had been forced into a feud between the Uchiha and the Senju, and it had shaped his view of the world in a way that made him wary of certain people. Naruko had also asked Kurama if he knew anything about her parents, but the fox had refused to answer, stating that it wasn't his place to share that information. While he admitted he knew things, he suggested that Naruko would learn the truth when the time was right. He implied that the secrecy around her parentage was due to political reasons, but he would not get involved in those matters. Naruko never pushed the issue further after that. "And then I let them go. I regret not handling them differently," Kurama muttered, recalling how the brothers had been involved in an incident that left him unsettled. Naruko nodded thoughtfully. "Tori always says it's important to be careful about what you eat." Kurama gave a gruff laugh. "They didn't give me indigestion, but I do regret not dealing with them more thoroughly. Next time, I'll make sure to handle things properly." "I'm sure you will," Naruko replied with a playful grin. Naruko started skipping her taijutsu lessons, not because she wanted to, but because she felt compelled to. Like with every other subject at the academy, the instructor seemed to always challenge her progress, but in taijutsu, the approach was more overt. They taught her the wrong way to stretch, even though her older classmates followed a different method. When she questioned them, they always insisted it was the best way for someone her age. That didn't sit right with her. Sparring was the worst part, as they often paired her with the strongest students, giving her older classmates the impression that it was acceptable to be more forceful during their matches. They didn't see sparring as a friendly contest. To them, it was just a way to take out their frustrations. Naruko knew she was being used as a target, and it felt unfair. However, her grades improved as she focused more on her studies and took notes diligently. She wasn't a genius, but she wasn't failing either. Despite their efforts to sabotage her learning, she stopped falling for their tactics. That's when they escalated their efforts to hinder her taijutsu training. Initially, she was oblivious to their schemes, but once she discovered her Jinchuriki status, she no longer wanted to be a punching bag for their frustrations. She didn't mind being called lazy or cowardly. For now, she had better ways to spend her time. Kurama had no plans of easing her training, not that the Baijuu could help much given their vastly different natures. However, Kurama did recall lessons from when they had trained Kushina and shared some helpful advice. The Baijuu's memory was almost photographic, and it proved to be useful. Kurama's advice was blunt but useful. Back then, they trained kids to build stamina and flexibility before teaching any taijutsu techniques. That's all you need to know for now. Figure out the rest yourself. That was enough for Naruko. She headed to the library, taking careful notes about building stamina and improving flexibility. She wanted to bring the books home, but the librarian was always so uptight around her that Naruko didn't want to risk any trouble. She could feel the tension whenever she was in the library, and the last thing she needed was to draw attention by trying to check out a book. Tori, her mentor, was frustrated by her decision to skip taijutsu lessons, but Naruko was steadfast in her decision. The Onbu had seen what was going on, and they too agreed that attending class was more counterproductive than beneficial. Naruko asked them to keep it a secret from the Sandaime Hokage, explaining that she didn't want to burden him with more stress, especially since he had been so busy lately. They couldn't deny that reasoning, as the Hokage was indeed dealing with a lot of political pressure at the time. Naruko's thoughtful consideration made it easier for the Onbu to agree with her request. Shinobi weren't allowed to teach academy students without proper authorization, but they could still offer advice and help Naruko avoid injuring herself. Naruko was grateful for their support, especially after Kurama made it clear that he wouldn't heal her injuries from carelessness. Naruko was hopeful that skipping those classes would finally resolve her issues with the academy. 1 week later, Naruko was in class, recounting what she had learned from Kurama about the battle between the Shodai Hokage and Uchiha Madara. She omitted the more violent details, keeping the story educational and neutral. She paused, looking up from her essay, and found that her teacher and the rest of the class were staring at her in shock. The Chonin looked pale, as though he might faint, and Naruko groaned internally. She had likely failed history class again. Why did school always feel like walking on a tightrope? The Chonin probably couldn't believe that she could write such a detailed essay. After all, she hadn't experienced the event herself. She had tried to be careful, using only information from textbooks, but she had borrowed Kurama's engaging narrative style to make her essay more interesting. Thinking back, the idea of Kurama writing an essay was ridiculous, but she didn't understand why the teacher would believe it for a moment. It seemed like the village was full of misunderstandings. Naruko sighed deeply. It was becoming increasingly difficult to see the point in continuing school under these circumstances. With a heavy heart, she left the academy and headed toward the forest near the Uchiha compound. Her mood lightened when she spotted her favorite oak tree, a grand monument that Kurama had told her about with a mix of disdain and awe. The tree had been planted by the Shodai Hokage as a symbol of friendship with the Uchiha clan. If you looked closely, you could spot faint carvings of the Uchiha and Senju crests at the top of its trunk. She loved to climb the tree and relax on one of its thick branches, using it as a quiet place to study. Today, she was working on improving her chakra control as she climbed, making slow but steady progress. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that mattered. She sighed, settling onto her branch. School is so frustrating, she muttered under her breath, pulling out her notes from her backpack and leaning against the trunk. Naruko opened her Fuinjutsu notebook, the largest one she had compiled so far. She had been studying the mechanics of various seals and had gathered some basic examples from the store. Since the tags were drawn with normal ink and not chakra ink, there was no danger of them activating unexpectedly. She was piecing together information from various sources to understand their components better. As she pondered the flash tag, a voice suddenly broke her concentration. "Good afternoon." Startled, Naruko flailed her arms to maintain her balance, knocking her backpack over in the process. Papers spilled everywhere, and to her horror, her history essay flew right toward the newcomer. She held her breath, watching as the papers tumbled in mid-air. To her relief, the stranger caught the book without even looking. Naruko exhaled in relief, but then her stomach dropped when she noticed the pile of papers falling all around the stranger. She had knocked over her notes. She was about to climb down when the person bent down to gather the papers, and Naruko froze when she noticed the Uchiha symbol on their back. An Uchiha? Soon after Naruko found out about the Kyuubi, she began to notice things she hadn't before. The village, or at least the shinobi population and a minority of the civilians, kept their distance from the Uchiha clan. It wasn't the outright glaring or ignoring that they did to her, but Naruko could tell they looked at the Uchiha clan cautiously. It was as though they feared the clan, and it was easy to guess why. After all, it was a well-known fact that only a few people could control a Baijuu, an Uchiha, a Makuten user, or a Jinchuriki. This also explained why the clan kept their distance from Naruko. In fact, she rarely saw an Uchiha on the same street as her. And yet, this Uchiha had approached and spoken to her. Was this person crazy? No good, no good. She chanted in her mind as she nervously sweated. Why had she asked Tori and his team to leave her alone for a while? She had even promised them she wouldn't get into any trouble. Then again, she hadn't expected anyone to find her here, yet this person had walked right up to her. It took all of her willpower to not bolt and run away. Naruko had nothing against the Uchiha clan personally, but Kurama's rants about how they were the harbingers of doom and wasted her father's good genes were not helping. Kurama was also convinced that not staying alert around the dojutsu-bearing clan would lead to her downfall. It was enough to keep Naruko on edge whenever she spotted an Uchiha nearby. Naruko was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice the Uchiha reading her history essay. She blinked when she heard the rustling of papers and saw that the Uchiha was reading her homework. She pointed at the dark-haired Uchiha. Oi! Don't read someone else's stuff without permission. The Uchiha looked up from his reading to glance at Naruko curiously. Naruko stared right back at him. He was older than Naruko, but still a young Uchiha with onyx eyes, black hair with bangs that framed his face, and a low-tied ponytail. There was also a distinct line under each of his eyes that made him look slightly older than his years. My apologies, the Uchiha said. I'm interested in history, especially about our village, and your essay is a very interesting read. Naruko raised an eyebrow, and after a brief moment, the Uchiha added, it's enlightening. Naruko stared at him in disbelief, and mentally asked her tenant, Kurama, is this person for real? What should I do? You are asking me? How should I know? My routine when I see an Uchiha is to either avoid, confront, or make them understand I mean business, Kurama griped. Naruko sighed. Can you give me some human advice? Kurama groaned. How did you run into an Uchiha here anyway? Naruko rolled her eyes inwardly. This forest is near their compound, though it's in a different area. True, but still. How likely is it that an Uchiha would stumble upon you in such a vast forest? Kurama wondered with a sigh. Uchiha are always a source of trouble, and you, Naruko, are a magnet for it. It's like you two are a match made in chaos. Is this really the time to be sarcastic, Kurama? Naruko asked internally, gritting her teeth. Naruko smiled sheepishly at the Uchiha. Excuse me, but could you give me my essay and notes back? The Uchiha nodded curtly, and Naruko almost sighed in relief, but held her breath when he started climbing the tree. What? Wait. She had thought he was going to leave her stuff on the ground and go away, not come closer. The Uchiha ignored her plea and jumped onto the branch where Naruko was sitting. He crouched down and placed the essay and notes in front of her in a neat stack. Here. Naruko rubbed her throbbing head and then looked around, sniffing the air. The Uchiha's lips curved into a faint smile. There's no one around for at least a 3-mile radius, Uzumaki Naruko-san. Naruko took her notes and essay back hesitantly, her eyes never leaving the Uchiha as she placed her belongings back into her backpack. Do I know you? She asked. My apologies, the Uchiha responded. My name is Uchiha Itachi. Great. The prodigy of the Uchiha clan, and no one in a 3-mile radius. Wonderful. Naruko ignored Kurama's sarcastic praise about how she had mastered the art of sarcasm. She was too busy wondering if this Uchiha was planning to harm her. You know who I am, right? I believe I just called you by your full name, Naruko-san, Itachi informed the Jinchuriki. Naruko's left eye twitched, and she wondered if Itachi was being sarcastic or simply stating the obvious. Right. She drawled, then decided to ask the question that had been bothering her. Why are you talking to me, Uchiha-san? Itachi eyed Naruko keenly, and Naruko averted her gaze. Do I need a reason? He replied. Uchiha-san, Naruko called. I am Uzumaki Naruko, and I've seen members of your clan turn and walk away whenever I was near them. She might as well be honest and let the prodigy know she was aware of the Uchiha clan's behavior toward her. I thought you'd do the same. Itachi smiled at that. You're more perceptive than the rumors suggest, Itachi said after a pause, or my clan is not as subtle as I thought. A mix of both, actually. Why she continued the conversation, she wasn't sure, but it seemed unlikely she could escape any time soon. Sometimes, even ninjas can't be subtle when they don't realize they're being watched. HN. I still remember you haven't answered my question about why you didn't avoid me like the rest of your clan, Naruko said, growing frustrated. And I'd like an answer soon. Itachi looked amused by her words. Exception proves the rule. Naruko groaned. Okay, seriously, what do you want, Uchiha-san? Kurama was getting anxious in her mind, urging her to run. Can I leave now? Why would you want to leave? Itachi asked. This conversation wasn't getting anywhere. The prodigy was keeping her on edge. Your lack of an answer is making me nervous. Subtlety wasn't her strong suit, especially with all the mind games being played. Itachi's lips curved into a small smile, which caught Naruko off guard. Would you believe me if I said I'm interested in your essay? He asked, much to Naruko's surprise. Naruko blinked. My essay? What's so interesting about it? She asked warily. You're an active ninja, and that essay was written by an academy student. Itachi sniffed. It's still better than what I read in standard history books. It's very detailed, too. Naruko was torn between feeling flattered someone thought her writing was good, and horrified that Itachi might think she was the QB. Hey. Thank you, so. She trailed off as she fished her essay from her backpack. You want it? She offered as she handed the essay over. In the back of her mind, Kurama was laughing at her for thinking giving Itachi her essay would make him leave her alone. Itachi blinked in surprise. Can I? Naruko nodded. It's already graded, and I have another copy at home, she replied sincerely as Itachi accepted the neatly folded paper. Itachi gave her a curt nod, his eyes scanning the paper with interest. Thank you, he said, only to look up and find Naruko had disappeared. All that was left was the paper floating in front of his face. He raised an eyebrow when he read the title. Mathematical Application in Fuinjutsu? Itachi looked around and saw Naruko running for her life. Wait, Naruko-kun. Itachi called. Oh no. Naruko's mind went haywire, and Kurama's joking chant of run for your life didn't help at all. Naruko moved faster, branches snapping under her feet from the increased speed. Itachi had to take a different route because Naruko had destroyed her own path. You left something, Itachi shouted. He could go faster and catch up to her, but it was obvious Naruko was terrified of him, and chasing her like that could lead to an accidental injury. Naruko's left eye twitched when she heard Itachi's shout. Who would believe that? As soon as she reached the border of the forest, she shouted, Torai. The Anbu was nearly knocked off his feet when Naruko tackled him. Oof. Tori. Save me. It wasn't the smartest thing she'd ever said, but she was too frightened to think clearly. Tori raised an eyebrow at the Uchiha heir, who shrugged casually. Okay. Itachi-kun, what's going on here? Itachi was a fresh Chunin who had been considered for a position in Tori's squad, so he knew who the prodigy was. I just wanted to return this to her, that's all, Itachi said honestly, pulling out a sheet of paper with neat handwriting to show the Anbu. Tori sighed and looked at the trembling girl in his arms. I feel like this is a long story that Hokage-sama would want to hear. The Sandaime rubbed his forehead thoughtfully, briefly glancing at Itachi, who appeared as composed as ever, before shifting his gaze to the Anbu squad assigned to guard Naruko. Finally, his eyes settled on Naruko, who was hiding behind Tori's legs, clutching onto the Anbu's pants as if her life depended on it. It had been some time since Naruko had been reduced to such a state, the last time being when she was 4 and believed the matron at the orphanage who told her there was a monster hiding under her bed. So, this is all a misunderstanding? Sarutobi Hiruzen asked, raising an eyebrow at the Uchiha heir. Yes, Hokage-sama, Itachi replied before turning to Naruko, who was still hiding, and showing her the paper he had found. And I believe this belongs to you, Naruko-chan. Naruko gazed at the paper with longing before looking at Tori and the Sandaime. The Sandaime sighed. Itachi-kun, could you explain things more clearly? Simply finding Naruko and having a brief chat with her before she suddenly runs away doesn't clarify much, he said, clearly frustrated. He had asked for a concise report. Itachi stiffened, shifting slightly. Hokage-sama, I'm afraid it's not my place to explain the details of our conversation, should you wish for more information. The Sandaime narrowed his eyes at Itachi and then at Naruko. It seemed both of them wanted to keep the conversation private. Very well, he said, releasing a small amount of chakra into a hidden seal near the window. Anything spoken here will remain in this room. Naruko watched the seal glow for a moment. So that's how privacy seals worked. Naruko-chan, Itachi's voice pulled her attention back to him. Would you mind if we shared what happened with Hokage-sama? He asked gently. Naruko flinched, uncertain about whether the conversation would be harmless. After a brief moment of hesitation, she decided to trust the familiar presence around her and answered, I don't mind. She had calmed down with Tori and the Sandaime nearby. It was just that being alone with a stranger, who might be a potential threat, had caused her to panic. Itachi smiled softly at her. To start, I came across Naruko, who was sitting on a branch of a gigantic oak tree in the forest. The Sandaime raised an eyebrow. A gigantic oak tree in the North Forest? There's such a tree? Konoha, like its namesake, was home to many lush forests, and while most large trees grew in Training Ground 44, some were scattered across Konoha. Pine, cedar, and yew trees were common, but never an oak. The Shadaime had planted many trees, but no one really kept track of them all. Naruko nodded as she stepped forward. Yujo no Ki, you know. The tree Shadaime gave to the Uchiha clan as a gift. A brief silence hung in the air as everyone looked at Naruko. Even Itachi, normally so composed, seemed surprised. It was the Sandaime who broke the silence. Such a tree exists? Naruko hesitated, realizing that neither Kurama nor she knew the tree had been forgotten after the relationship between the Senju and Uchiha clans soured. Even the Sandaime hadn't known about it. Hey! Never mind, the Sandaime sighed. What were you two discussing? Itachi refocused on the Hokage. Naruko-chan's history essay, he explained, placing the folded paper on the Hokage's desk. It's quite well written, and she was kind enough to give it to me. Naruko shifted nervously as the Sandaime unfolded the paper and began to read her essay. It's impressive, just as you said, Itachi-kun. It was clear that the essay had impressed Itachi, which caused the Sandaime to smile quietly. Itachi had always been perceptive, wise beyond his years, and had spent much time researching the village's history from the writings left by their ancestors. While the content of Naruko's essay was impressive, Sandaime suspected that Itachi was particularly drawn to the narrative style. The essay was not only informative but also written in such a detailed manner that it felt like the reader was witnessing the events firsthand. However, this still doesn't explain why Naruko-chan ran away from you and handed you her essay, the Hokage continued, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Itachi for any sign of deception. Itachi shrugged. I think it was simply a diversion for her to escape. Naruko cringed, realizing just how obvious she had been. Itachi, however, seemed resigned to telling the Hokage the truth. The reason she ran away is likely because she knows how my clan avoids her. She must have been nervous when I approached her. Naruko flinched, feeling the weight of their gaze. Well, I know I'm not exactly popular, but it's only the Uchihas who turn away whenever they see me, she said, fidgeting. And he? She pointed at Itachi. He approached me and spoke to me calmly, so I became cautious and nervous. The Sandaime and the Anbu members exchanged uneasy glances. It seemed they had misjudged Naruko's trust in others. All this time, they had believed she was overly trusting and friendly, but it appeared they had been mistaken. I'm sorry for running away, Uchiha-san, Naruko said, bowing respectfully to Itachi. I'm just not used to talking to strangers. She smiled shyly. I didn't mean to be rude. Itachi smiled warmly. You don't need to apologize. Being cautious and vigilant are admirable traits for a shinobi. Naruko beamed at the compliment. Despite everything Kurama had said about the Uchihas, Itachi's words seemed sincere. And I believe I should return this to you. Before that, the Hokage interjected, grateful the misunderstanding was resolved. May I see that paper? Naruko's face paled, but she knew there was no way out. She gave Itachi a reluctant nod, allowing him to hand the paper to the Hokage. Busted. The Sandaime's eyes widened as he read the contents of the paper. It was basic research on Fuuinjutsu, but very thorough and insightful. You're studying Fuuinjutsu, Naruko-chan? He said with a chuckle. It was clear that Naruko had inherited her parents' talents. A budding Fuuinjutsu prodigy. Naruko nodded shyly. Yes, Hokage-sama. Could I see your other notes? To everyone's surprise, Naruko stepped back defensively, clutching her backpack protectively. Naruko-chan? Tori asked, his concern evident. He couldn't recall seeing Naruko so protective of anything other than her love for ramen. The Sandaime chuckled softly. He had almost forgotten how fiercely protective Fuinjutsu practitioners could be over their research. Jiraiya had once nearly punched him when he tried to sneak a peek at his notes out of curiosity. If the stories about what Minato and Kushina had done to anyone who dared to look at their notes were true, the Sandaime realized he would need to warn Naruko's future teammates about respecting her privacy when it came to Fuinjutsu. Kurama groaned from within his seal, watching Naruko's behavior. It was typical of Uzumaki descendants to be so protective over their research. He wondered how Naruko would react in the future if anyone dared to look at her personal seal research without permission. Maybe one of the few mistakes the Sage of Six Paths ever made was creating the Uchiha Senju conflict and marrying that Uzumaki woman. Naruko-chan, I will return your notes, Sandaime promised, his voice sincere. I'll be careful with them. Naruko hesitated for a moment before she gingerly approached the desk and placed her notes there. Here, Ji-chan. Thank you, Naruko-chan. Sandaime smiled at her, carefully flipping through the pages. Impressive. You're clearly a prodigy in Fuinjutsu, Naruko-chan. Naruko's face lit up with pride. Really? She asked, beaming, as she gave a mental nod to Kurama, who reminded her to remain cautious. You've grown so knowledgeable, Naruko. Hey. I read a lot, Naruko admitted, not one to be overly modest. Yes, it seems that way. Sandaime nodded sagely, handing her back her notes. And you even know about Yujo no Ki, something I didn't know about. Where did you learn about it? Naruko froze, unsure of what to say. Kurama, why doesn't Ji-chan know about that tree? The fox snorted, probably because the peace between the Uchihas and Senjus didn't last long, and the tree, of course, was forgotten. What should I say? Naruko wondered. I can't tell them you told me. Kurama didn't answer, leaving Naruko to come up with an explanation. Hey. Naruko rubbed the back of her head sheepishly. I was just guessing. She smiled nervously. There's a carving of the Senju and Uchiha crests on top of the tree, and above it is Konoha's crest with the word Yujo written. Since the tree is so big, I thought only Shadaime could have grown it. Sandaime blinked in surprise but nodded thoughtfully. Well done, Naruko-chan. You've discovered a precious monument. A legacy left by our Shadaime. He made a mental note to put up a sign and place sacred rope around the tree. Naruko smiled sheepishly. Thanks, Ji-chan. She checked her notes, ensuring everything was in order, blissfully unaware of the concerned look on the Sandaime's face. It seemed Naruko didn't fully trust him yet. Sandaime sighed deeply, his tone weary. Naruko-chan, while it's wonderful that you're learning new things, you need to balance your studies. You've skipped all your taijutsu classes, and your grades, which had improved last month, have dropped again. He looked at her with concern. What do you have to say for yourself? Much to Naruko's relief, Tori stepped forward. Hokage-sama, may I offer my opinion? He asked respectfully. Sandaime nodded. I'm listening, Tori. The Anbu cleared her throat. From my observations, Naruko-chan is not suited to the current curriculum of our academy, she stated sternly, and the young girl stared openly at the bird-masked Anbu. Most of the classes are counterproductive to Naruko-chan's development, and the instructors are not. The Anbu trailed off, searching for a fitting word. Proficient. In dealing with a student like her. The Hokage flinched inwardly at the subtle way his Anbu phrased the predicament. Then please explain to me what kind of student Naruko-chan is, and how we should provide her with a suitable tutelage. Tori grinned under her mask. Naruko-chan is a very talented child, and if we keep her in the academy, it would just curb her potential. After a moment, she added, Naruko-chan has shown a remarkable aptitude for Fuinjutsu, a field of study that, unfortunately, is not provided in the academy. And we all know what an invaluable asset a Fuinjutsu practitioner is. Sandaime nodded sagely in agreement. The main defense mechanism of Konoha was the legacy of Uzumaki Mito, and she was the best practitioner of her generation. Jiraiya, Minato, and Kushina were seal masters and key players in previous wars. With the first traveling to maintain their spy network, and the latter two passing away, Konoha had been left with mid-level practitioners who maintained Konoha's barrier and the defense mechanism that Mito-sama had left them. It was difficult to nurture a talented seal master due to the high risk and challenges involved in learning the craft. Naruko-chan's potential as a Fuinjutsu practitioner should be utilized. It's an asset Konoha can't afford to lose, Tori stated with conviction. That alone should grant her some privileges to further her studies in seals and other shinobi arts. The old Hokage held back a grin. Someone deserved a promotion for exploiting a loophole to ensure Naruko's education. Konoha had granted many privileges to prodigies, though usually through early graduation, like the one given to Itachi, so the prodigy could gain field experience sooner. However, in Naruko's case, she was recognized as a prodigy only in certain fields. I see. Naruko-chan. The young girl perked up at the Hokage, elated to be included in the conversation once again. You will spend the rest of this year in the academy. And no more skipping classes. Naruko cringed at Sandaime's warning. I will speak with the academy's instructors about your circumstances. If everything went smoothly, no instructor would refuse to help Naruko anymore. In fact, they would likely be eager to assist, or at least remain neutral. By the end of the year, I would like to see progress in the shinobi arts, especially Fuuinjutsu. Naruko nodded eagerly. Hi. Especially Fuuinjutsu, the Sandaime repeated. If you continue to make the same progress I have seen in your notes, you will be granted the privilege of an apprenticeship. Naruko gaped at that. Apprenticeship? What about the academy? The Hokage smiled at her. You won't be required to attend it anymore. Which would certainly make the instructors happy that they wouldn't have to deal with Naruko any longer. You will be considered graduated, but you won't be granted Jinan status until your master deems you to be Jinan level in the shinobi arts overall, the Sandaime explained. As soon as the last word left his mouth, Naruko tackled him in a bear hug. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Naruko chanted happily, then kissed the Hokage's cheek affectionately. I love you, Hokage Jiken. You're the best. Sandaime chuckled softly as he ruffled Naruko's spiky hair. Yes, I am. But remember, it's you who has to work hard to earn these privileges. Naruko nodded enthusiastically. Of course, Ji-chan. I'll work hard, she said, releasing her hug and jumping backward to land in front of the Hokage's desk. Naruko stood suddenly and bowed respectfully. Hokage-sama, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. I promise to dedicate myself to Fuuinjutsu and other shinobi arts so that I will not disappoint your expectations. Sandaime looked at Naruko in surprise, startled to see such a mature, eloquent speech coming from a 6-year-old. Even Tori looked surprised and proud under her mask, while Itachi observed his fellow prodigy attentively. The old Kage shook his head with an amused smile on his face. It seemed they had underestimated Naruko a bit too much. I'm looking forward to it, Naruko-chan. Dear viewers. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed this fanfic video and that it was worth the listen. If you did, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more awesome content. Thank you for your support. Regards. 6 Path Weeb.